Hi, everyone. Welcome to this virtual conversation dedicated to the production of medical devices using additive manufacturing. My name is Katie Sindley, and I am the managing editor at 3D Additive Media. I have the honor to moderate this panel between Ruchi, Houston, and Nicholas present here. As you probably know, the medical and healthcare industries are among the top vertical industries that will help accelerate the growth of additive manufacturing. But here is the thing. In an industry like the medical, where the condition is sometimes life-threatening, very often one only highlights the advantages of AM at the expense of real implications for both the doctor and the patient. There are so many questions that surround this topic, so many questions that this Additive Talk sessions aims to discuss. But before we dive into our conversations, I would like to give the floor to our speakers here so that they can introduce themselves as well as the company they are working for. So maybe Dr. Ruchi. Can you proceed, Dr. Ruchi?
Thank you, Katie. Thank you for the invitation, and welcome everyone for this short panel discussion. And I hope that we can give as much as possible and you learn as much as possible. Well, I am Dr. Ruchi Pathak, and I have a background of around 14 years of experience as a medical professional. I started from dentistry over to maxillofacial surgery, then into research, and then into entrepreneurship. So I am coming from the podcast, which is Surgeons in 3D Printing Podcast, and I'm the founder of Reconstructive Healthcare Solutions, which is incubated in India, and it's a startup. So thank you, Katie, once again.
It's a pleasure, Dr. Ruchi. What about you, Dr. Yison? Tell us more about you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Isun. I'm working from University Hospitals Leuven. So I'm working in the department of oral maxillofacial surgery. So here we design different type of surgical plannings. I mostly focus on the reconstructive surgery, which we offer a minimal invasive and customized solution for each individual patient. So for example, design the surgical cutting guide and also the individual customized implant. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. And Nicholas?
Yes, hello, Katie. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. I am the CEO of the Swiss M4M Center. We are a technology transfer center dedicated to the medical industry. Our focus is to simplify or to facilitate the adoption of this technology in the field of the industry and provide support services able to provide value in terms of patient care. I am a medtech engineer since over 18 years now. I did start my career at big companies like Synthes or Johnson & Johnson, and I have now the pleasure to be in a smaller structure, but focused on the high-tech field, and pleasure to be here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you, ladies and gentlemen. A quick reminder for our audience, for those of you who are joining us for the first time in this session, please note that you can always send your questions in the Q&A chat, and our experts will respond to them later on. Well, if that's not the first time you listen to one of our Additive Talk sessions, then you already know how it works. So make yourself comfortable and feel free to share your thoughts with us. So, Nicholas, Dr. Yison, Dr. Ruchi, what are the specific factors or limitations that lead medical professionals to consider 3D printing as an option?
Okay,
So,
maybe
yeah,
I can start here. Yeah, because I'm working in the CMF field, so we know that for the CMF, like orthodontic surgery, that each patient have an individual solution. So you can't standardize the device you provided for each patient. For example, the wafers, every patient it's different. So then if you want to produce those wafers, I think 3D printing is a perfect solution for us, which it's reduce the cost and also it's fast. Because now the cost of the 3D printer has already down to about 6,000 euro for the medical applications. You can finish your design in the evening and then just start the 3D printer in the evening. And the next day before the operation, it's ready and clean it. Then you can ready to use it. And
Okay.
then which it's 3D printing make our work much easier, because otherwise we have always send this design to the dental lab. They have to print it and have to post it back. So by using the 3D printing first, we can very easy to adapt the design. So we can change our design even one day before the operation, and then we can fast produce the surgical splint. And then in the end, that the producing cost is also very low because of uh, technology development. That's the 3D printer become cheaper and cheaper, and also it's easier to use. So now in our department, even the assistant, they can manage to use it themselves. So I
Okay.
think this is really a big revolution, and I think that it will the 3D printer will go into the clinical more and more.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I see. I know Nicholas is coming also from a similar background since he's a biomedical engineer. But Nicholas, do you have any other limitations that you've, observed, you know, in the
Yes,
field?
it's a very good question. I think what we observe, I've been in contact with surgeons since many years. I had the pleasure to also be placed at the hospital in
Yeah.
Zurich, where I did work a lot on specific solutions.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about additive manufacturing, the first thing I think that is a limitation is really a deep understanding about the opportunities. Of course, we have here specialists, but if you talk to, I would say, a majority of the surgeon that starts or try to learn, they need first to understand what is possible. And it's also, I would say, our responsibility as producer to explain that. What is about the mechanical strengths, what is about the biocompatibility, what is about the design freedom allowed with a custom-made device. And all these things needs first to be understood and then applied step by step, maybe with a first small project, maybe a little bit more complicated. At the end, maybe a complete reconstruction, a tumor patient, or so on, that we can provide very good implants to the benefit of the patient.
I see. And as a surgeon, Dr. Ruchi, what do you have to say?
Yeah, thank you, Katie, for this question, because I've been through this spectrum of having been there as a dentist, then going forward as a maxillofacial surgeon, and then going through the same technology as a researcher.
Yeah.
What I found was that technology has a very crucial role in in this 3D printing technology as a whole.
Okay.
And we as surgeons, we as professionals and researchers, and
Mm-hmm.
as Nicholas said, that understanding this technology, I think that's where the first challenge comes in.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that widespread. I mean, I'm not talking of specific countries, but to take it as a whole, I
Mm-hmm.
think the first step is the understanding where I do feel there is a challenge
Okay.
because it involves a lot of technology. The second aspect is the collaboration which is involved, because you involve engineers, you involve biomedical engineers, and and then the doctors. And the
Yeah.
professionals don't have that much time to kind of learn the technology and get into it and get through all of that process. So that kind of is another hurdle. And the
Mm-hmm.
last one is that the regulatories are not perfectly in place. And so you kind of fear to kind of, pick this
Yeah.
one and pick this one and use it for this patient because
Yeah.
you have a lot going in your mind because you know what?
Mm-hmm.
The doctor is going to be right in front of the patient. Everybody else is behind the bars. Nobody's
Yeah.
seen. So you have to really represent it very well.
Yeah, I see. And you mentioned collaboration. I don't
Yes.
know if you have the opportunity to quickly, see or assess the type of applications where medical 3D printing can be applied. Maybe Yisom will have, something to say about it later on. But as a surgeon, do you have the ability to quickly assess the different applications where 3D printed medical devices can be used to provide specific care to a patient?
Well, with this point, I would say that as Nicholas said, you have to have the basic understanding. And,
Mm-hmm.
this was something which came to my mind well before like a couple of years. And that
Mm-hmm.
was the reason I went into research and I tried to figure out, what is happening in this technology. Because straightforward, if I go to a service, initially, even before I went to research, I had actually got some work done with a service provider. And I realized that the work was done, but my understanding was very poor. And I
Okay.
really wanted to know what is going behind this. And that
Mm-hmm.
was the reason to get into research. So there are so many aspects that we can use with this technology. I think we are still scratching the surface. There
Mm-hmm.
is so much more. It could be some part of a device. It
Mm-hmm.
could be a splint. It could be a guide. It could be an implant. It could be so many spectrums of things other than, the models, the guides, the implants, the medical devices. And then, COVID has brought this uh, technology into the forefront, you can say, because now we know nasopharyngeal swabs and, the masks, the
Mm-hmm.
headgears, all of this is added, ventilator parts, and there is so much more.
Yeah, I see. Dr. Yison, I believe that maybe you have the experience, to quickly assess the type of applications that can be applied here.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe that I can show some screenshots to show which type of application we have done.
Okay, all right. Yeah. So
So
just for our audience, I would like you I would like to remind you that you can enlarge your screen once Dr. Yison will share his screen to show us some pictures of what they have done at the New Z Leuven Hospital.
yeah. So first case I'd like to show you is that. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, so here you can see that this is the patient because of the radionecrosis. So, but unfortunately, we are not able to make a bone reconstruction, which, for example, use a fibula or DCA iliac crest.
Mhm.
So then finally, we try to use this solution to design a customized reconstruction plate for him.
Okay.
So this is one application for that.
Okay.
So you see, this is the design, and this is a printing case, and also to make sure that it really works. And also we even make a locking screws thread
Okay.
within the 3D printed plate and make it compatible with the Synthes reconstruction screws. So all the design work is done here. You see that's during the operation what have done. We also design the cutting guides. We can put firstly precisely put the guide in, and there's a screw holes to fix the reconstruction plate, and this
Mhm.
is the resection margin,
Oh,
and that's what done in the other side. Okay, that's end result.
oh, that's intense. Nice
Okay,
pictures.
so this is what we have done in the end. So this is one of the very first application we have done. We said, okay, we try to use the 3D printing technology and the customized solution for this patient.
Mhm.
Okay, that's one thing. And then gradually we realize that, okay, if you want to use this type of reconstruction plate, then we have a second patient. You see, you have a more aggressive ossifying fibroma in this young patient. So then, because he is a fan of the football, so he still want to play football when he was young, because now it's in his early 20 years old. So he
Yeah.
first want to have this reconstruction plate. And
Mhm.
after years, perhaps when he is 30 years old, he doesn't want to play football anymore, and then we can take a fibula bone and do the reconstruction. So that's what we do for him. We design a customized plate for him, and that's according to his facial contour. And additionally, we start some mechanical analyze to check, okay, what's the mechanical property for the plate? Is that strong enough? And we have this calculation. And in the end, we can print this plate by the third party player, for example, like 3D System or other big players. And then in the end, we install this implant in, and now he's very happy. And we still make a follow up, and seems everything is fine. So this is the application in the reconstruction plate. And also, like Dr. Rachi said, that's okay. You can also use the one to design kind of a customized osteosynthesis plate for orthokinetic surgery. So this is a model study we have been performed 2 or 3 years ago. So you can do the plate and also the cutting resection guide. So you see, this is the design. And then if you want to implant in the patient, that's the final print. However, we only use it as the validation to prove this technique. So we did the model surgery and to cut this 3D printed skull, and then we reposition. We did the simulation for the drilling and the cutting, and we use a plate to relocate the maxilla. And then afterwards, we have this one. We use the CBCT scanner to rescan the whole results, and we make a superposition to this original one. So for example, the gray color is the original plan, and also the yellow color is what we achieved. You see, we did a 3-time test, and then that's the first result. So we did some validation to check the difference on the occlusal surface plan. And the second test, and this is the last test here. So you see that we can make a validation to see, okay, what's the maximum error it's reduced. So which prove that if you can repeat this procedure several times, then you can improve the surgical accuracy. So that's one. And also for the orbit, this is what we, as a standard procedure, to design the orbital plate for the patient who gets a fracture. For example, you see this patient clearly, and he has a fracture here because of a traffic accident. So according to his anatomical structure, we made a orbital plate here, and that's the design. And then we outsource this design to another company so they can produce 3D printed for us.
Okay.
So this we have done during the operation. You see, I have a perfect fit on the bone.
Is it an eye?
Excuse me?
Is it the eye of the patient?
Yes, the orbit floor.
Oh my God.
And then you see that we also did a post-op 3D scan. You can see that we analyze surgical accuracy to know how good we can perform for this type of operation. You see that here the red color is what's the plan, and the highlight region is what we achieved. So it's almost get superposition together. You see here. So via using this technique, we can make a very precise calculation to see, okay, what's the volume on the left orbit? What's the volume on the right orbit? If we place the plate, how much volume is in the end result? And also, according to the preoperative MRI scans, we can know, and also the clinical information, we can judge, do we need to do additional extra volume to get some extra volume for this patient or not. So via this information, you can precisely make a good plan and make a good design for the orbit plate, which cannot be offered by the traditional planning. For example, you can just bend your plate because it won't fit, or it doesn't have a perfect fit on the patient's body. So this is some applications what we do in our department.
Okay.
Yeah. So some application that show you, and also, for example, like orbit plate, it's a kind of a standardized method or treatment method used right now.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Yeason. From a technological standpoint, Nicholas, what are the AM technologies that are already currently being leveraged in the healthcare industry, and for what type of applications? I believe Dr. Yeason has responded to this question partially.
No, but I think in a larger point of view, when you take the helicopter and you go up and you have a look to the additive technology today, you realize that many technologies are used from a simple model that you use to plan your surgery to a very complex medical device. You can use FDM in a simple way, to produce models, or you can use SLA. Hearing aids market is basically supported by this technology to do today. Custom-made hearing aids are basically provided either in SLS or SLA. When you go a little bit more in metallic production, SLM, what we do here in Switzerland is basically power bed fusion or E-beam, when you want to increase a little bit the production rate of your implants. And now you have a bunch of new technologies like bind jetting that coming into the game. That means, to answer the question, we have plenty of technologies. We need to understand them and apply them to the need we have. And as we understand that, I think there is a big value to take out of 3D printing today.
Okay, but do these technologies require specific customization of features for certain applications?
Do you mean on the technology level?
Yes, yes, at the technical level.
I would say it's rather be able to master this technology in a stable way.
Okay.
The production setup that you put in place as a producer should be in a way that you are sure that you produce risk-free.
Okay.
Always in the same way, always with the same performance. Because what is planned in a hospital is basically very sharp, very precise. And I think the expectation of the surgeon is to receive what they envision. And the job that we have is really to master this technology on the spot to be able to provide an implant that is at the end functioning in the right way. Biocompatibility, mechanical performance, and other aspects that are very important as well.
Yeah, but speaking of the choice for a specific additive manufacturing technology, is it made based on standardization or on a given application? That's
Both.
important to know.
It's
Both.
all
Okay.
both, but I would say it's more the application that drives the technology,
Okay.
because you are not able to do everything with every technology. FDM is very limited. Uh, if you go up to SLS with polymer powder, you can do jigs today for surgery, precise drilling, precise sewing. And then you go up to SLM, that is basically to address any kind of complexity, lattice structures, special honeycomb structure that are provided then to be implanted into the patient.
Okay. Dr. Yeason, do you agree with that?
Yes, I completely agree, because the 3D printing technology, that they can not only fabricate the customized device, but of course it can also be used as a volume production. For example, for the span cage or something which cannot be produced by the traditional method. For example, latency structure, it cannot be fabricated by the traditional method. So then 3D printing technique is a perfect solution for this kind of application.
Yeah. Dr. Rishi, I know as a surgeon that you're the one who is going, to integrate such type of medical devices into the patient. So how can we assess the impact of 3D printed medical devices according to you?
So, if I would say, how do you measure the impact?
Yeah.
Well, I think if this question was asked to me like 2 years before, it would have been a different scenario altogether. But these past 2 years, with the COVID-19 having brought this technology in the forefront, and people knowing so much about the technology today, we can say the impact has been huge.
Okay.
Only if we look at the COVID scenario, only by the pandemic, we can see how the frozen chains had really, what they'd done to the hospitals, and how we could fulfill the demands using this technology, how we could customize so many things, even the smallest bit to a door handle, starting from the masks. Again, I would come back to the PPEs and all of that stuff. So the impact is huge. And as I said, we're just scratching the surface. So I think it's the time to actually get deeper, understand this technology, because there are so many technologies within the same technology. We really need to see what are the areas, because for every professional, there are different areas one can work on and different technologies that we can use. But I think we shouldn't be getting scared with, hearing all of this, because this is what happens then with surgeons. Something is working for me for the past 20 years. Now, why do I take this year to actually, get into this technology stuff? So I think rather than getting scared, I think we need to take the first step. And that was the reason I wrote a book for surgeons, because I trying to make it very, very simple and without getting into the technical details, as Nicholas and Dr. White were talking about, this technology for this purpose. I totally get that. It's important to know that, but it scares you if you have to know it on the very first note. So I think one should take the first step, start with models, start with, guides and all of that stuff. And then gradually, I think with time, each one learns with experience in this technology. And it has huge potential, no doubt about that.
Yeah, but Dr. Yeason, because I'm jumping a little bit on what you explained earlier. So how do these medical devices, 3D printed medical devices, differ from standard devices traditionally used?
For example, like what I presented for the orbital plate. oh, that's the big difference, because you can precisely design, and also you can make a precise analyze before the operation.
Okay.
Because as the traditional plate, most of the time, how do you use it? You did a 3D print. You only 3D printed the models, and then you do the manually bend the traditional plate according to your model, and you try to use that one during the operation. But you know, if you bend it manually, it won't fit perfectly on the
Yeah,
patient.
I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you can do the customized design, it's really fit on the patient body, and also it saves you operation time
Mm-hmm.
dramatically.
Yeah.
So which means that, okay, we can have a fully preparation beforehand, and then during the operation, you know almost 80% what you need to know. And so you
Yeah.
can quickly do the operation and finish it. So which
Okay.
means you can reduce operation time, and also perhaps it can be reduced the infection rate, and perhaps it can also get a better clinical outcome. So
Yeah.
that's why, especially for the orbit, that's and also during the after post-operatively, if your design is not perfect, then the patient can see it immediately, the difference from the orbit level, and also when they're looking at the up and low the function of orbit, you can access it immediately after the operation.
And can this be dangerous for the patient?
No, because if you can make a design and it only have a support on the remaining bones, so it's one danger for the patient, because it's conventional procedure. But then we just use computer assisted design to help the surgeon to make a better treatment plan.
Okay, I see.
Yeah,
But
and also, for example, for the reconstruction plate, no manufacturer will say, okay, I offer you a plate which is according to the patient. All the surgeon, they need to bend the plate manually according to the models. And then there's a risk of the plate fracture according to the literature. Those type of plates usually get a fracture within 36 months.
okay.
For example, the conventional reconstruction plate without the bone reconstruction, and
Okay,
the
that's a
plate,
lot.
that's a lot. So,
Yeah.
so now we're investigate if we use the 3D printed plate, if how can we optimize the structure, geometric structure of the design, when maybe you can let the plate serve longer in the patient body. So this is our research question now, what we are doing. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I see. But what about the validation process of the use of these devices? Maybe Nicholas has something to share about it. Is it too long or too short?
Validation is a big topic. It's especially on the process point of view. We have
Mhm.
first a validation as we learn from a surgical point of view, that you are sure what you plan is able to work. But on our side, in the production setup, the validation is a different approach. I mean, we need to provide the safety that our process are always working in the same way. We heard that it's no risk for the surgeons to use the devices. I'm very happy to hear that, but we all have to know that it's a huge amount of work to come to this state. I mean, providing a bit of metal for a patient requires very sharp know-how on production point of view.
Yeah.
And the machine today, the technology is quite young. It's 40 years old. We are building the material from itself, from powder, in example of SLM. And we need to understand if this material is basically working like we expect in the body. What about if we have the material that is not completely melted, or have different mechanical behavior because we have an anisotropic behavior of the material? What
Mm.
is about biocompatibility because the melting process is not performed in the quite way, or one day you have too much humidity in your production setup? These are all parameters that we need to control in a very precise way with small tolerances, that we can basically let the surgeon sleep and use the devices without worries. And it's all about the validation work we do here. It's a huge topic where the people needs to know what they do. But at the end, it's the only way how we can succeed for the adoption of this technology on a larger point of view.
Okay. I had a feeling that Nicholas was looking at Dr. Rishi when he was talking about that specific aspect. Dr. Rishi, did you feel, did you feel related? Did you feel connected, to what he had said?
Yes, totally. Yes, of course.
Okay, that's it. And Dr. Easton, do you agree? Do you have any different experience regarding that validation process?
Completely. And also the strange thing is that because we are a design center, so we are not producing especially for the implants. So sometimes when I send my request to another 3D printing company, they also ask me to see, okay, do you want the sandblasting? Do you want to do polishing of the implants? But then I'm asking myself, I think those questions should not be answered by me. It should be answered by the company. Yeah, because we have, I know something happened, for example, someone did the 3D printing of the implant, and then we analyzed the quality, but we found that, okay, there's a tremendous difference if you apply sandblasting or not sandblasting. It influences your quality.
Yes.
But
Okay.
then if we don't have our engineers or the PhD student from mechanical engineering inside, we never know this.
Okay.
Perhaps you may only notice when this one happens when they get a fracture of the implant in the patient body. Yeah, so I think that's it. Because most of the time the company only provide me, for example, geometric validation to prove that okay, we print exactly almost the same as what you designed. But after so many years experience, we know that's not enough, especially for the reconstruction plate. It should have sharing the load. So it should have a kind of clear protocol even from the company side to say, okay, for those type of design, what procedure should be done. For example, sandblasting must be included. Polishing, maybe or maybe not, because it's not so important. It depends on if you want to have a bone integration on the implant. So, but then this is a question that I think as a clinician, it's a lot of things you didn't know. I think they should know that.
Yeah, but from the patient, point of view, for instance, for applications that require direct use on the patient, don't you think that the use of new technologies such as AM raise a certain fear in the patient?
According from our patient, though, they are very happy to, they are very open to this new technique.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Interesting. What about you, Dr. Ruchi?
So, because you asked this question, I would start this with something my father told me when I was young.
Tell me.
So everything that we did, he always said that, think for the best, but be prepared for the worst.
Oh, God.
And so, and so whenever it's time to kind of have any technology for the first time, and we know it's a new technology, my personal preference is to put it into research, because then you have a proper ethical protocol to follow. You have the patient covered. And then I would say the second thing is, even before you get into that research, I think there is a certain amount of knowledge that you really need to gather before you really get into the patient. So even then you have those risks which might be there, which might not be there. But then if it is done through research, you know that what are going to be the probable outcomes, and you can measure them. And once these things are kind of standardized or validated in terms of a surgeon, then you can, kind of get it into your regular protocol in terms of performing those surgeries with patients. Yeah, that's my feeling with that.
Thank you. But at the manufacturing level, Nicholas, I'm coming back to you. What are the technical limitations that still need to be tackled?
I think if you want to follow the adoption path, you have different limitation today. Certainly, the productivity of the machines makes it still an expensive choice. Depending the patient need and the lack of other option, additive manufacturing is the only way to go, and then we are also able to pay that. But of course, the healthcare cost is a big topic everywhere. And it's also our responsibility to address that in the right way. That means productivity of the machines, be able to provide better implants at lower cost will at the end support the adoption. That's the first.
Okay.
The second one comes back to what we discussed before, is the understanding of this technology. I mean, early technology, we still learn a lot, everyone in his field. And as soon as there is a question mark somewhere, we need to address it, because it's not the goal to do something for the patient. It's only the best that we need to do, and there is no compromise about that. That means understanding first, then apply. And these two things are today the limitation where we will follow, and I hope that we will see that it will be, I must say, better understood in the next future, that we can all speak about 3D printing in an easy way.
Okay. Yeah, I see. But that's the manufacturing part of the business. But at the design level, for instance, or other aspects such as sterilization or debris contamination are still not considered to be relevant factors during the design process or the fabrication process. How can we explain that, Dr. Yisun?
So you mean that from the design?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, because we have some problem with this, with the sterilization problem. So that's a very good question, because when we want to sterilize this component, for example, for the surgical guide, so once you use you should consider the material used. For example, we have a Stratasys 3D printer here. They use the resin, so then you should know, okay, the temperature to be used cannot be more than 125 degrees. If it's more than that, your design model gets deformation during the sterilization process. So it happens in the beginning, we don't know that. So we use the steam sterilization way. Then during the operation, when we get it out, we found it shrinks the model. So I think that you should have a clear negotiation between you and also if you have a printer yourself, you should carefully read the technical notes to see how to clean the models. Or if you want to outsource with another one, because I know some companies want to reduce the cost, they use FDM, or they just use cheap material to print the models for you, just for the way of virtualization. But if you want to use directly in the operation room, you should tell them that it's going to be sterilized. So then they should use another better material for you. Or you should know that, okay, I still use the same material, but I use another way of sterilization. Like, for example, in our hospital, we have another way like cold sterilization, which we use about 60 degrees to sterilize the models. So now if we use surgical cutting guides, I have to mark it down cold way for sterilize. Yeah? But if you use, for example, for the implants, like for say titanium implant, and then you can use a steam way to sterilize your model. But on other products, you have to negotiate with manufacturing. For example, with the TMJ components, which we use for the patient, then it's not possible. You have to use the radiation way to clean your models. So they have different ways. You have a clear communication with the supplier. So you have, and also with your sterilization department within the hospital to know that. Otherwise, there will be a huge trouble.
But Dr. Rucci, don't you think that this customization aspect is a hurdle in the standardization of medical devices?
So, Katie, yes, I do believe that, because every device is different, and you cannot assign a batch to one. Every device is a different batch. Now, how do you assign that batch number that you have in your the conventional devices? So for every device, you have to go through a different process in terms of validation, in terms of, even if it is a design, it's a different design for every patient, even if more or less it looks similar. But again, the forces are different. So if you go for an analysis, things will be different.
Okay.
So this is a definite hurdle. And I think this is also one of the hurdles doctors kind of think before they have to really go ahead with that. So
Mm,
it's with very complex cases that you want to experiment with. You just don't want to go with cases you would have otherwise been able to manage with conventional devices. So it
mhm.
is definite. It is a definite hurdle. Yes.
Okay, great. I believe Nicholas and Dr. Yeason agree with her. Or are there any other limitations that
Uh, I,
we can take into account, regarding the standardization process?
I completely agree with that, especially in the oral maxillofacial. Everything is unique.
Mm,
Everything. So perhaps you can only have a general protocol, for example, to say, okay, what's the minimum size?
mhm,
What's the minimum thickness?
mhm,
And also perhaps you need to quantify in according to different applications. For example, for orthokinetic, what's the minimum size? What's the
mhm,
different screw holes, things like that. Or for the corneal plate, what's the minimum size? You have to really make a different category for each application. You can't
mm,
say in the general overview for all different type of surgery. It's impossible.
mhm,
And
mm,
also perhaps you should also say that, okay, you need to have a kind of engineering validation
mm,
before you produce the plate.
mhm,
Because now if I send my design to a third party company, they ask me to prove this
mhm.
is already engineering proved or validated design, especially for the reconstruction plate.
Okay, I
And
see.
also I need to uh, sign a contract in case there's anything related to the design. It's not the fault from the company, it's a fault from the designer.
Okay.
So
Right.
there's clear regulation now to see
Mhm,
whose fault it is, and we should follow that. But
mhm,
unfortunately, on the design protocol, no, it's still according to the experience by the designer.
mhm.
So there, maybe we should do some works there to try to make a standard in each application, but not for general overview. It's
No.
not possible.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah. See, Nicholas, do you want to share something?
No, I think it's absolutely right what we hear. Custom-made devices is, I would say, a special way to provide patient health care.
Mm-hmm.
It's an expensive way somehow because it starts at the clinics with some
Mm-hmm.
planning, with some, I would say, design work.
Mm-hmm.
But this is not the end. It starts to, I would say, to be very critical. Then you want to produce it, and
Yeah.
the protocols are absolutely mandatory. Of course, as a producer, you don't take the risk of the design. It's also how the custom-made devices are defined in the law.
Mm-hmm.
It's on a prescription from a medical surgeon. That means the surgeon has a clear vision how
Mm-hmm.
to provide that, and the producer has the capabilities in a safe way to do that.
Mm-hmm.
What is missing, I would say, is uh, a strong collaboration, or missing maybe not, but sometimes it's my personal opinion that this collaboration between the clinics and the production should be close, because all these questions that needs to be addressed are partially in the head of the surgeon and partially in the head of the engineer, and together you are able to do the best.
Yeah.
And
Correct.
both needs to sit at the same table in somehow and to find the best way.
Mm-hmm.
If this is still, I would say, not too expensive, that's something I can answer. It depends the application and
Mm-hmm.
really the patient need.
I see. Uh, I would like us to pause for a minute to take that question from the audience. I can see that the audience is a little bit shy this morning or this afternoon. So that question is the one from Jaya. I hope I pronounced your name very well. If not, I'm very sorry about that. So first of all, I would like to thank you all for providing insight into the applications of AM in the medical field. I would like to know if there are any medical implants where lattice structures are being used or lattice structures have the potential to be used? I think that's a question for Dr. Yison or Nicholas. And Nicholas.
Oh, basically, yes, lattice structure, and correct me, huh? I'm not clinician, but lattice structure are widely used today in the medical field, especially in the orthopedics. For example, here I have a device that is, I would say, produced in thousands of parts per day. It's a hip cup. It's intended to be implanted in the pelvis. It's one part of the hip prosthesis, and the standard way to do that is to do plasma spray. This structure here on the surface is intended to foster bone integration, that you have the secondary stability, as we name it, that is after a certain time basically performed. That means included into the bone. Now today, the lattice structure and the possibilities provided by AM allows to produce that in a single part without having many processes. That means here you have really a special structure on the surface that foster the bone integration to attract the cells, and hopefully after certain weeks integrates this implant in the correct way into the body. This is one example, but you have many other where you need to foster this integration between the implant and the bone.
Okay, thank you, Nicholas. Or Dr. Eason, do you want to share anything else regarding this question?
Yes, because for example, for the osteotomy, in the mandible reconstruction, we usually now use a fibula, free fibula flap for the reconstruction. But then perhaps people are still looking for a kind of a solution. If we can use latency structure of the mandible, that's which you can use it as an implant to bridging the bone. So which means that as I showed in my presentation here, I can't find it. As I showed in my presentation, that I designed a bridging plate for one of the patients. So there's no bone inside. So people are still looking for another solution. If you use a plate and also you use 3D printed latency structure and plate and filling the gap there, do you think the bone can grow in from both sides and finally reconstruct the bone? That's kind of, for example, as a critical size defect, which is more than 5 centimeter of the defect, the bone can grow in together. It's impossible. So if there's a solution via 3D printed latency structure, I think it will be a huge revolution in the clinical and also for the technical side to think about how can we treat the patient in another way.
Yeah.
So we don't use their own bone anymore. We can use a 3D printed implant which with latency structure. And one step in the future, can you use a 3D printed bioresorbable material for this application? For example, bioceramic, but it's fatigue. Another kind of material could be zinc and magnesium, the mixed one.
Correct.
So now we're doing the animal studies to do the validation to see what's the performance of 3D printed bioresorbable material. Can they really help us to treatment the bone defect? If it works, that's can be another type of application in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, correct. Another questions comes up in the Q&A chat from Jitka. Thank you for the interesting talk on the validation level. Is CT scan of the metal AM component a standard and necessary validation procedure for all the produced parts or only for some selected ones? That's a good one.
I think you need to check that the material you used for your implant. If your implant is a type of titanium, I
Mm.
think it will give a huge artifacts in the CT scan.
Okay.
Or perhaps you mean it's about a micro CT scan. You want to see pore size, or if you have a subsurface pores within your 3D printed component.
Mm.
But then most of the time people doesn't use CT scan. They just cut your implant in and they go directly for the SEM uh,
Mm.
uh, scanning to check what's the surface quality. So
Mm.
we at least we don't really use a CT scan to scan the 3D printed metal parts because it gives a huge artifacts. I
Mm.
don't
Uh,
know if Nicolo have more experience by using
yes.
CT scanner.
Yes, CT scan on a production level is an option, but it's a very expensive one and should be justified depending the application or the request. What we try to do is to avoid that if possible and try to validate the device in a different way. What you can do is together with an implant, you can print dummies. FDA provides you some guidance about that. It's test dummies for mechanical strengths but also density check. And with these two checks, I would say validation, you are able to understand if your printed device has a good quality or not in terms of porosity. And but if you want to go further, CT scan is the only way, but need to be, I would say, added to the cost of the process.
Okay. Thank you.
Nicola, I have a question for the CT scan. You mean the industry CT scanner, right? Okay,
Yes.
it's not like
Yeah,
the normal medical
absolutely.
application.
It's
Yeah,
in the industry.
yeah.
It's industry to
So
see in
it
the
have a high
material.
energy from
Yes.
the CT
Yeah.
spectrum. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Ah, okay, great. Another questions comes up from Anastasia. Thank you for this discussion. What will be roughly the split of polymers versus metals used in AM medical today? Is there a trend towards more polymer? If so, what are the drivers/risks? I believe Nicholas might be uniquely positioned to answer this question.
I don't know the answer precisely, but my expectation is that we have a split of 60, maybe 70% polymers to 30, 40% metal today.
Mm.
This is basically due to the fact that a lot of anatomical models are produced, prototypes are produced in the medical field in polymers,
Mm.
but also jigs and fixtures. That is quite a huge market.
Mm.
The metal market is taking up speed today, especially for this kind of implants or what we had the pleasure to see before, but needs a little bit time that everyone feels confident with that. That's the reason why I think polymer is still a majority of the application, but
Mm.
metals is running behind very fast.
I don't know why, but I'm not surprised by this answer. um, Elias has a question. Hi, all, and thank you for hosting this very interesting talk. I've been actively working in the AM field, and some of the huge advantages of the technology are what keeps me so interested. One of the many fascinating capabilities to me is the ability to produce monolithic parts, such as complex compliant mechanisms. In your experience, how are such devices used in the medical field? Some examples that come in mind will be assistive surgical tools, deformable implants, etc. Have you ever come across such examples in your career? And if yes, what were the benefits? I don't know if Dr. Rucci or Dr. Yison have something to say about it.
I don't really familiar with this molecular parts. Maybe some surgical instruments.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, we had in the past different projects in the way to provide surgical instruments in an easier way. That means to avoid all the complex mechanisms that are quite difficult to clean.
Mm.
And this compliance structure may add an answer to that. and the technology of additive manufacturing may be an option. Laser cutting or water jetting is also very interesting. That's the reason why it's competing today with AM, because the complexity of the parts due to the planner, I would say, requirements for an instruments is quite in the way that you have to choose your devices to be cost effective.
Dr. Ruchi, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I would like to say that because AM is not, if it is only customizable part, and if you have to produce the same parts in bulk, I think there is a cost to it.
Mm.
So it also depends on if these are customizable equipments, probably where is the facility, where is the cost coming from, and all of those things come into picture because this technology is just starting in hospitals. We are just starting out, and if I take it holistically, like,
Mhm.
so getting to that point wherein you have customizable equipments is not a difficult one, but it does involve the cost that it does. And so I think all of that is also another aspect. Where is the cost coming from, and what is it giving you in return of that cost? Is it that ease? How big, how important it is for you in terms of the surgery, in terms of what you're giving to the patient? So I think those are the areas, and that is the reason I think we haven't been deeper into this aspect up until now.
Okay. Yes, I hope this answers your questions. Another question is the one from Alexander. What are the most commonly used materials? Oh, I'm sorry, I missed the question. Yeah, what are the most commonly used materials for medical AM applications? And what are the materials you see the most potentially in for the future? Thanks for the insight. Probably Nicholas or Dr. Yitsen should have any outcomes to share.
I think it depends on the applications. For example,
Yeah.
if they want only for the medical virtualization, then just normal plastics can be used, resin to do the 3D printing models for the virtualization. And also regarding surgical template, then perhaps you need some medical grade resin for your application, which can be approved. For example, you can get a patient blood for 24 hours or something like that. Then regarding implant, then definitely Nicholas has more experience, like titanium or titanium alloys, like in orthopedic. They have to print thousands, tens of thousands of that each day for those type of applications.
No, it's right. I mean, you have a titanium grade 23, that is one of the standard material you use for implants. Then you have stainless steels. The 360L is commonly used as an implant, especially in the US. Then you have cobalt chrome, that is on
Yeah.
the orthopedic field. And the craniomaxillofacial surgeries requires, I would say, a softer material. Then you go on the grade 1 or 2 titaniums that you can bend. And then on the surgical point of view, you have the 74 pH, that is the material per excellence, and all this kind of things. I mean, you have plenty of devices that you can use, and the material that is applicable. And thank you, Alice, for the question.
Yeah, and I would also like to add to this that I think it's not just about the material. I think it's also about where you are in this curve of implementing the technology. Because when you start this technology, you are using more of models, so it's more of polymers and stuff like that. As you progress, you move towards metals, and it also depends on the kind of patient that you're doing. And with the other technologies like AR, VR, virtual reality and augmented reality and all of this coming in, I think printing more and more models is getting lesser. So that is also going to have an overlap with additive manufacturing, because the more AR and VR picks up, I think modeling materials are going to, they won't die down, but I think definitely then we will be doing more of planning in a virtual environment or in an augmented environment.
That's I completely agree. That's once VR, AR, you have hardware and software. If you can get easy access, then perhaps the surgeon won't use the models anymore.
Exactly.
It can be reduced gradually. Yeah.
Okay. Is there any questions you would like to ask to your other co-panelists?
I have a question for Nicolo, because I'm quite interested for the 3D printing applications in orthopedic, because now you showed, for example, for the span cage and also for other for the orthopedic application. So how do you think a small company, what's the technical revolution compared, for example, 5 years ago about the 3D printing technique? So how do you position a new company in this market and compete with the big companies like perhaps Striker or 3D System? And what's the technical revolution about, especially in the orthopedic, in the 3D printing?
So basically knowing that this technology is at the beginning, we are just at the start.
Okay.
And the opportunities to do new devices is huge. We learn with craniomaxillofacial, that was one of the first application that was very well investigated, but it's just the beginning. What about other indications, tumor patient, replacement of certain part of the bones, new designs? I mean, the designs that we have today may not be the designs of tomorrow. And this, provided by a new technology, may be a very interesting approach. How we position ourselves, basically being small, is of course a challenge, but it's also an advantage in terms of flexibility, reaction. Be able to work closely with the surgeons is a key. That means you have to speak with them on a level that you provide the technical, I would say, know-how, and understand the clinical know-how from a surgeon. Of course, Stryker, Johnson Johnson are doing that very well and master every day this kind of technology. However, there are big companies that focus on specific applications that may let an opportunity for smaller players to address specific needs. And being flexible is also being cheaper or more efficient. That
Yeah.
means that there is certainly a place for newcomers in the near future, because this technology is basically just waking up, and the promise of better patient care is still something that we want to foster altogether.
Okay, thank you.
That was a good question, Dr. Eason.
Yeah,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
thank you.
Dr. Richie, do you have any questions that you would like to ask to one of your co-panelists?
Yeah, I wanted to ask Dr. Yusin. So you're designing in-house in a way. Yeah.
Yes.
So what about the metal portions, or what about the printing part that you kind of have to? Then you'll have to depend on a service provider for that aspect.
It's depend on our applications. If you only want 3D printed models or 3D printing guides, we can produce the in-house, because we have one Stratasys 3D printer, that's a big one, and also for the registrar, they have a small one from Formlabs. So then for the Formlabs, they can use it for printing dental cast, to print occlusal splint, or print surgical template for implant placement. So they play with that one. But once we try to print the big model like a skull or the fibula bone or a big guys, then we use Stratasys. Yeah. But then if we say, okay, we want to print something very special like implant, or we want to make a peak device, then we have to outsource it to another company.
Right. Yeah. So, and the other question is for Nicholas. So, like, with the point of care centers coming in, I'm wondering that isn't it difficult to be in a market where you also have point of care centers associated with the hospitals, and then you are a separate service provider? So, how do you deal with that? It's really difficult.
The point of care will be a topic for the next talk, I think, because
Very true.
I will plan that.
I, I personally think it's a very interesting business model. However, it's a very challenging model because knowing all the know-how that you need to have on a production point of view, on a quality point of view, on a safety point of view, you need to reinvent a new job within the hospital to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Who is
Exactly.
taking the responsibility at the end of producing these devices? And there are some initiatives like in New York with big companies that starts very interesting to see how it will is not. This is why I still believe that a service provider, even if you have 100 kilometers to ship a device, makes still sense today.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
S- So you don't
Thank you.
think so you don't think it's possible that, let's say, we start a 3D titanium printing service within the hospital?
It will be possible one day, but it will require people and a legal structure that will allow that.
Yeah.
And this is still not solved today.
Yes.
And
Huge cost.
it's an opportunity. It's the innovation. That will be great, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay.
Thank,
Thank you. Thank you for
Thank
sharing
you.
your
thank
information. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Nicola. My last question is for you. If you have any questions that you would like to ask to your co-panelist.
No, I do not have question. I think it was very interesting. I was also very pleased to hear the different aspects and to see that this technology is taking up to speed.
Mm,
Uh, and I hope that it will follow this path in the next future, in the near future, that
yeah,
we all can provide the best solution for our peers.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that we have exceeded a little bit the time that was planned for this conversation, meaning that this conversation was very, very interesting. So that was it. Thank you, Ruchi, Nicolas, and then Yison for joining us and for sharing your expertise today. I think what we have shared here today will leave some food for thought to everyone present today. Most importantly, I hope this panel has been useful in any way to you, the audience. Thank you for listening and for your questions. You guys are the reason why we conduct these sessions. So stay tuned for the next panel and stay safe wherever you are in the world. Have a good evening.
Okay, guys.
Bye.